Driven by greed, he kicked out his pregnant wife to be with his mistress for business reasons. 8 years later, the wife returned with triplets and a piece of paper in her hand that completely destroyed him. Snow fell gently across Boston on that December afternoon, blanketing the city in pristine white. Eliza Carter stood at the window of her downtown apartment, watching snowflakes dance on the wind, one hand resting instinctively on her still flat stomach. The news hadn't fully sunk in yet. After months of trying, she was pregnant. The luxury apartment offered a stunning view of the city's skyline, far removed from the modest Pittsburgh neighborhood where she'd grown up. At 28, Eliza had traveled a long way from her roots, both geographically and socially, when she married Christopher Armstrong 2 years ago. She twisted the platinum wedding band on her finger, recalling their first meeting. As a nurse at Massachusetts General, she'd cared for Christopher's mother during a complicated cardiac procedure. What began as grateful visits from a concerned son transformed into something neither of them had expected. "We're from different worlds," Christopher had admitted during their whirlwind courtship, "but that's what makes us perfect. You keep me grounded." The Armstrong name carried weight in Boston. Old money, prestigious connections, and a flourishing tech empire built by 3 generations. Christopher, at 32, was the golden child poised to take the family legacy to new heights as CEO of Armstrong Technologies. Eliza glanced at her phone, 5:45 p.m. Christopher would be home soon. Tonight she would finally share the news. The contrast between them had always been stark. Where Christopher moved through high society with effortless charm, Eliza still felt like an imposter at corporate galas and charity events. His colleagues' wives, with their finishing school pedigrees and family connections, never quite accepted the nurse from Pittsburgh who had somehow captured the Armstrong air. "Mrs. Armstrong, how quaint that you still work," they would say, cocktails in hand. "Isn't it exhausting dealing with all those bodily fluids?" Christopher always defended her, at least in the beginning. "My wife saves lives," he'd say proudly, arm around her waist. "What did you accomplish today besides lunch at the club?" The sound of keys in the door pulled Eliza from her memories. She smoothed her sweater and tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "Eliza?" Christopher's deep voice echoed through their home. "In the living room," she called back, heart fluttering. Christopher Armstrong entered with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, with piercing blue eyes that had melted Eliza's resolve the first time they'd locked with hers. He loosened his tie and offered a distracted smile. "How was your day?" she asked, noticing the tension around his eyes. "Exhausting." The Wilson contract negotiations dragged on forever. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch without offering her any, unusual for him. "And yours?" Eliza took a deep breath. "I went to the doctor today." Christopher paused mid-sip. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," she smiled. "We're having a baby, Christopher." The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably. Christopher's face remained perfectly still, as though processing complex data rather than receiving joyful news. Finally, his features arranged themselves into what Eliza recognized as his business smile, practiced, polished, but not reaching his eyes. "That's wonderful," he said, voice carefully modulated. "We should celebrate tonight. Reservations at Maison Laurent?" Eliza blinked, thrown by his controlled reaction. They'd been trying for a baby for 6 months. She'd expected more. "Are you happy?" she asked directly. "Of course," he replied, crossing the room to kiss her forehead. "I'm just processing. It's big news." Later that evening at Maison Laurent, surrounded by crystal and candlelight, Christopher seemed transformed. He ordered her favorite dishes, made elaborate toasts to their future, and spoke excitedly about nursery plans. The spark she'd fallen in love with had returned. "To the newest Armstrong," he said, clinking his champagne against her sparkling water. "And to you, the most beautiful mother-to-be in Boston." Eliza relaxed into the moment, attributing his earlier reaction to shock. This was the Christopher she knew, loving, attentive, making her feel like the center of his universe. "I love you," she whispered across the table. "We're family," he replied, squeezing her hand. "Nothing will ever change that." Yet something had shifted in their relationship over recent months. Subtle changes Eliza had dismissed. Christopher worked later, traveled more frequently, and when home, seemed perpetually distracted by his phone. The passionate discussions they once shared about books, politics, and dreams had dwindled to perfunctory exchanges about schedules and social obligations. That night, for the first time in weeks, Christopher made love to her with the intensity of their early relationship. She fell asleep in his arms, hopeful that the baby news had rekindled what had been fading between them. Morning arrived with pale winter sunlight and the sound of Christopher's shower running. Eliza stretched, feeling lighter than she had in months. She slipped out of bed and headed to the bathroom to brush her teeth. Christopher's voice echoed from behind the shower curtain. He was on the phone again. I know, he said in hushed tones. We need to talk. Not now. Later today. Yes, of course, I understand what's at stake. Eliza frowned, reaching for her toothbrush. As she moved the wastebasket to access the lower drawer, something caught her eye. A white plastic stick partially wrapped in tissue. Confused, she extracted it carefully. A pregnancy test. Positive. And definitely not hers. The bathroom tilted around her as blood rushed from her head. With trembling hands, she turned the test over, examining it more closely. The date written in unfamiliar handwriting showed it was taken just 2 days ago. Christopher's voice continued from the shower, oblivious. Don't worry, I'll handle everything, trust me. Handle what? Handle who? The questions burned through Eliza's mind as pieces began falling into horrifying place. The late nights, the weekend, business trips, the mysterious calls. Fighting nausea, she quietly slipped the test into her robe pocket and left the bathroom before Christopher finished his shower. She needed time to think, to process what this might mean. But deep down, a terrible certainty was already taking root. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Is Christopher still pretending he's going to leave his wife for you? Honey, he's been telling us both the same lies. We need to talk. F. Eliza stared at the screen, her world cracking along fault lines she'd never noticed. Who was F? And what did she mean by leave his wife? The test in her pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. When Christopher emerged from the bathroom, Eliza was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone clutched in her hand, the unfamiliar test hidden in her robe pocket. His smile faltered when he saw her expression. Everything okay? He asked, securing his watch, a family heirloom passed down through generations of Armstrong men. Who is F? Eliza asked, her voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside her. Christopher's face performed a remarkable transformation, surprise followed by calculation, then settling into concerned confusion. I don't know what you're talking about. The woman who just texted me thinking she was texting your other pregnant girlfriend. Eliza held up her phone, displaying the message. For a split second, Christopher's mask slipped, revealing something cold and foreign beneath. In that moment, Eliza realized she was looking at a stranger wearing her husband's face. Show me, he said, reaching for the phone. Eliza stood, backing away. Who is she, Christopher? And why does she think you're leaving me for her? His jaw tightened. Someone's clearly playing a cruel joke. Give me the phone, Eliza. The commanding tone, one she'd never heard directed at her before, sent a chill through her body. This wasn't the man who'd vowed to love her forever. This was the Christopher Armstrong who closed million-dollar deals and crushed competition without remorse. Then explain this, she said, producing the positive pregnancy test from her pocket. I found it in our bathroom trash this morning. It's not mine. Christopher froze, his eyes darting between the test and her face. For the first time in their relationship, Eliza saw something she never expected to see in those blue eyes. Fear. Where did you get that? He asked, voice dangerously quiet. That's your response? Not denial, not an explanation, just, where did you get that? Eliza felt something breaking inside her chest. Who is she, Christopher? And how long have you been lying to me? To us. Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. In the silence that followed, everything about their marriage seemed to hang in the balance. The perfect life they'd built together, or rather, the perfect life Eliza thought they'd built, was revealed as nothing more than an elaborate facade. Christopher's phone buzzed in his hand. He glanced down automatically, and Eliza caught a glimpse of the name on the screen, Freya Winters. The daughter of William Winters, the billionaire investor Christopher had been courting for months to save Armstrong Technologies from financial trouble. The family kept hidden from the public. It's her, isn't it? Eliza whispered, the final piece clicking into place. Freya Winters. The look on Christopher's face told her everything she needed to know, even before he spoke the words that would shatter her world forever. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. 7 words that demolished everything Eliza thought she knew about her marriage. She stood motionless, the positive pregnancy test still clutched in her hand, as Christopher's admission hung in the air between them. "How long?" she managed to ask, her voice barely audible. Christopher sighed, transforming before her eyes into someone calculating rather than remorseful. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Eliza's voice steadied, anger beginning to burn through the shock. 3 months, he said finally, loosening his tie as if preparing for a difficult business discussion. It began during the winter's investment negotiations. The timeline hit Eliza like a physical blow. 3 months ago, they had still been actively trying for a baby. 3 months ago, Christopher had whispered promises of forever in her ear. And now she's pregnant too. Eliza's statement hung in the air. Not a question, but an accusation. Christopher didn't deny it. Instead, he checked his watch, a gesture so coldly dismissive that Eliza felt physically ill. "I have a meeting at 9, he said. "We'll discuss this tonight. I need to figure out how to handle this situation." "Handle this situation?" Eliza echoed incredulously. "I'm your wife, Christopher. I'm carrying your child. This isn't a PR crisis to manage." Something hardened in his expression. "Actually, it is. The winter's investment is critical to saving Armstrong Technologies. My family's entire legacy is at stake, and that justifies betraying your marriage vows, creating another family behind my back. It's complicated, Eliza. You wouldn't understand the pressures." "Don't you dare," she interrupted, voice trembling with rage. "Don't you dare suggest I'm too simple to understand your sophisticated moral compromises." Christopher grabbed his briefcase, clearly eager to escape the confrontation. "We'll talk tonight. I need time to think." After he left, Eliza sat motionless on the edge of their bed, mind racing. The nurse in her, trained to assess, diagnose, and act decisively in crises, gradually took over. She needed information. She began with Christopher's laptop, but found it password protected. His desk drawers contained nothing suspicious. In their shared bathroom, she discovered expensive women's perfume hidden behind cleaning supplies, a scent she'd occasionally detected on his clothes and dismissed as belonging to a colleague. Around noon, Eliza made a decision. If Christopher wouldn't provide answers, she would find them herself. The Armstrong Technologies headquarters occupied a gleaming tower in downtown Boston, its sleek glass facade reflecting the winter sky. Eliza had only visited a handful of times, always feeling out of place among the polished executives and their equally polished assistants. She stepped off the elevator on the executive floor, heart pounding as she approached the reception desk. "I'm here to surprise my husband for lunch," she told the receptionist with a practiced smile. "Mr. Armstrong is in a meeting, Mrs. Armstrong," the young woman replied. "Would you like to wait in his office? I believe he should be finished soon." "Perfect." Eliza nodded gratefully and followed the familiar route to Christopher's corner office. Once inside, she closed the door and moved quickly to his desk. Most documents were locked away, but his calendar remained open on his computer. Scrolling through recent months, Eliza found regular entries labeled simply FW, often during times Christopher had claimed to be in business meetings or traveling. She was photographing the calendar with her phone when voices approached outside. Quickly, she moved to the sitting area, arranging herself casually on the leather sofa as the door opened. Christopher entered mid-conversation, accompanied by a strikingly beautiful blonde woman. Freya Winters was everything Eliza was not. Tall, elegantly dressed in designer clothes, with the confident posture of someone born into privilege. Neither noticed Eliza immediately, too engrossed in their conversation. "Daddy wants confirmation by Friday," Freya was saying. "He won't move forward without guarantees about the board position and the patent rights." "He'll have it," Christopher assured her, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. "Lawrence is drafting the paperwork now." "And what about your wife?" Freya asked, voice dropping to a more intimate register. "Have you told her yet?" The question hung in the air as Christopher finally registered Eliza's presence. He froze, color draining from his face. "Eliza," he managed, stepping away from Freya. "What are you doing here?" "I thought we could have lunch," she replied with remarkable composure. "But I see you're already engaged." Freya Winters assessed Eliza with cool curiosity, showing neither embarrassment nor remorse. "So you're the nurse," she said, the words dripping with condescension. "Christopher has told me so much about you." "Funny, he's told me nothing about you," Eliza countered, rising from the sofa. except that you're pregnant with his child while he was still trying to conceive with me. Congratulations to you both on such a modern arrangement." Christopher stepped between them. "Eliza, this isn't the place." "Where is the place, Christopher? Our home where you've been lying to me for months, or perhaps a lawyer's office, which I assume is our next destination?" Freya laughed softly. "You can skip the dramatics. Christopher and I have already spoken with our attorneys. You'll be well compensated for your discretion, assuming you're reasonable." The casual cruelty of her words struck Eliza like a slap. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated business arrangement, with her as the inconvenient variable to be eliminated. "I need to speak with my wife privately," Christopher told Freya. His tone clipped. Freya shrugged elegantly. "Don't forget our dinner with Daddy tonight. He's expecting answers about the Armstrong restructuring plan." She turned to Eliza with a practiced smile. "It's been illuminating to meet you." After she left, silence engulfed the office. Christopher loosened his tie, a nervous habit Eliza once found endearing. "You shouldn't have come here," he said finally, "and you shouldn't have betrayed our marriage, yet here we are." Eliza's voice remained steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside her. "How long were you planning to keep up this charade?" Christopher sat heavily in his chair. "I was going to tell you this weekend. The timing is unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" Eliza echoed. "Is that what you call learning your husband has been living a double life, that he's fathered another child while trying for one with me? The Winters investment will save Armstrong Technologies from bankruptcy," Christopher explained, as if discussing a routine business matter. "William Winters has been looking for a suitable match for Freya, someone who can eventually manage his holdings. Our connection is mutually beneficial." "And where exactly do I fit into this corporate merger you're calling a relationship?" Christopher met her eyes directly for the first time. "You don't. Not anymore. The paperwork will be delivered tomorrow. Generous terms, full confidentiality. You'll want for nothing financially." The clinical detachment in his voice made Eliza physically recoil. "And our baby? Your child?" Something flickered across Christopher's face. Not quite regret, but recognition of an inconvenient complication. "I'll provide support, of course, but Freya will be my wife and her child the Armstrong heir." "Because her bloodline is suitable?" Eliza asked, the full weight of his betrayal becoming clear. "While mine isn't." "This isn't personal, Eliza." "Not personal," she laughed bitterly. "You made vows to me. You held me in your arms last night after I told you I was carrying your child. How is that not personal?" Christopher's expression hardened. "And my family has spent generations building Armstrong Technologies. I won't be the one who loses it all because I married a nurse from Pittsburgh instead of securing the right connections." Each word struck like a physical blow. The Christopher she thought she knew, the man who claimed to love her despite their different backgrounds, had been a carefully constructed illusion. "You have until the end of the week to move out," he continued. "The settlement will include a housing allowance. My lawyers suggest you return to Pittsburgh, where the media is less likely to take interest." Eliza stared at him, searching for any trace of the man she had married. "Did you ever love me at all?" Christopher hesitated, and in that hesitation, Eliza found her answer. "I thought I did," he said finally. "But love doesn't save family legacies or failing companies. I need to be practical now." She removed her wedding ring and placed it deliberately on his desk. "Congratulations on your practical new life, Mr. Armstrong. I hope it brings you everything you deserve." The next morning, Eliza began packing her belongings in a daze. Each item carried memories now tainted by deception: the anniversary gifts, the photos from happier times, the books they'd read together. How much of their shared life had been real, and how much a calculated performance on Christopher's part? The divorce papers arrived by courier before noon, a thick envelope containing the dissolution of her marriage in cold legal language. The settlement was indeed generous. A substantial lump sum, monthly payments, health insurance for her and the baby, a confidentiality agreement preventing her from discussing Armstrong family matters publicly. She signed mechanically, too emotionally exhausted to fight. What was there to salvage from a marriage built on such fundamental deception? While sorting through Christopher's desk for anything she might have left there, Eliza discovered a false bottom in the top drawer. Inside lay a folder marked Winters Armstrong Integration Confidential. Curiosity mingled with bitter anger as she opened it. The contents appeared to be internal documents about Armstrong Technologies' partnership with Winters Pharmaceuticals, specifically a joint venture developing cardiac monitoring technology. One section caught her professional attention: references to clinical trial data that seemed inconsistent with standard medical protocols. As a cardiac nurse, Eliza recognized the implications immediately. The Armstrong-Winters partnership appeared to be manipulating trial results to fast-track FDA approval for a potentially dangerous medical device. She hesitated, then took photos of key pages before returning the folder to its hiding place. Whether these documents would ever matter to her, she couldn't say, but something told her to preserve evidence of the corruption at the heart of the empire that had destroyed her marriage. 3 days later, Eliza stood in the Boston apartment for the last time. Her belongings, those she'd chosen to keep, had been shipped ahead to her mother's house in Pittsburgh. In her purse was a one-way plane ticket and the first installment of her settlement money. The phone she and Christopher had shared lay on the counter, replaced by a new one containing only her mother's number and her doctor's office. She was severing every connection to the life she'd built in Boston, every connection except the child growing inside her. As she locked the door for the final time, Eliza placed the key in an envelope for the property manager. She was leaving behind not just an apartment, but the woman she had been, trusting, perhaps naive, believing in promises that had proved as substantial as morning mist. In her carry-on bag, alongside her essential medications and a few precious keepsakes, was a USB drive containing copies of the Armstrong-Winters documents. She had no plans to use them, but their presence offered a strange comfort, proof that in this uneven battlefield she wasn't entirely without weapons. On the taxi ride to Logan Airport, as Boston's familiar skyline receded behind her, Eliza placed one hand protectively over her stomach. "It's just us now," she whispered to her unborn child, "but we're going to be okay." What she couldn't possibly know as the plane lifted off was that us meant more than she realized, and that her journey back to herself was only just beginning. Pittsburgh welcomed Eliza with gray skies and freezing rain, fitting weather for the emotional storm she carried within. The modest two-story home where she grew up stood unchanged, a testament to the stability her mother had always provided. Marina Carter opened the door before Eliza could knock, as if she'd been watching at the window. "Oh, sweetheart," Marina whispered, enveloping her daughter in a fierce embrace. No explanations were needed in that moment. Eliza had shared the bare details over the phone, marriage over, pregnant, coming home, but the depth of her devastation was evident in her hollow eyes and diminished frame. "Come inside," Marina said, taking Eliza's carry-on. "I've made your favorite chicken soup." The kitchen smelled of herbs and childhood memories, a stark contrast to the sterile minimalism of the Boston apartment. Here, mugs didn't match, furniture showed signs of wear, and the refrigerator displayed decades-old magnets and childhood artwork. "I've set up your old room," Marina explained, pouring tea into chipped mugs. "We can convert the office into a nursery when you're ready." When, not if. No judgment, no pressure, just quiet support. Tears Eliza had been holding back for days finally broke free. "I was such a fool, Mum," she sobbed, clutching her tea. "I believed everything he said. I thought our love transcended our differences." Marina took her daughter's hands. "Loving completely doesn't make you a fool, Eliza. It makes you courageous. The shame belongs to him, not you." Those words became a lifeline in the weeks that followed. While Christopher's generous settlement provided financial security, rebuilding her shattered identity proved harder. Who was she now? Not Mrs. Armstrong, not the nurse who'd married into Boston society. Just Eliza Carter, pregnant, divorced before 30, starting over in her childhood bedroom. Her first prenatal appointment in Pittsburgh delivered stunning news. "There are 3 distinct heartbeats," Dr. Hayes explained, moving the ultrasound wand across Eliza's abdomen. "Congratulations, Ms. Carter. You're expecting triplets." The world seemed to tilt beneath her. "Triplets? Are you certain?" "Absolutely," the doctor confirmed, pointing to the screen. 3 separate amniotic sacs, 3 healthy embryos. That evening, Eliza sat on the back porch swing where she'd spent countless teenage hours dreaming of her future. 3 babies. Not just one life to build, but 4, her own and her children's. "What am I going to do, Mum?" she asked, voice trembling. 1 baby seemed manageable, but 3. Marina sat beside her, their shoulders touching in familiar comfort. "You're going to do what Carter women have always done. Rise to the occasion." She squeezed Eliza's hand. "And you won't do it alone." The pregnancy progressed with the complications typical of carrying multiples: extreme fatigue, debilitating morning sickness, and early signs of preeclampsia kept Eliza under close medical supervision. By week 20, Dr. Hayes ordered bed rest. "Your blood pressure concerns me," he explained. "The goal is to keep these babies growing inside you as long as possible." Confined to bed, Eliza found herself with nothing but time to think. The settlement money from Christopher would support them temporarily, but raising 3 children as a single mother required a more sustainable plan. "I could return to nursing once they're born," she told her mother one evening. "The hospital has a good daycare program." Marina nodded thoughtfully. "That's one option. Or what? You could consider what you really want, not just what seems practical." The question lingered as days stretched into weeks. What did she want? Before meeting Christopher, Eliza had considered medical school, a dream deferred when romance and marriage intervened. During a checkup in her 28th week, Dr. Hayes mentioned the hospital's struggle to retain specialized cardiac care staff. "We need doctors who understand both the technical and human aspects of medicine," he remarked, "especially in pediatric cardiology." Something clicked in Eliza. "Do you think it's crazy to consider medical school with triplets?" Dr. Hayes studied her thoughtfully. "Challenging, certainly. Impossible? No, especially not for someone with your determination." That night, Eliza researched medical school applications, scholarships, and childcare options until dawn. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt a spark of genuine hope, not just survival, but purpose. At 32 weeks, her water broke during a routine examination. Everything afterward became a blur of controlled medical chaos: steroid injections to accelerate lung development, magnesium sulfate to protect developing brains, the cold brightness of the operating room for an emergency C-section. "Stay with us, Eliza," Dr. Hayes urged as her blood pressure plummeted during the procedure. The first cry, tiny but fierce, penetrated her fading consciousness. Then another, then a third. Her children had arrived. Recovery proved arduous. The triplets, 2 girls and a boy she named Abigail, Serena, and Nathan, remained in NICU for 6 weeks. Eliza divided her time between healing from major surgery and learning to care for 3 premature infants, each weighing barely 4 pounds. "They have your determination," Marina observed as tiny Abigail, the smallest, fought through a respiratory infection. "And their father's eyes." The remark stung. Christopher hadn't contacted her since she left Boston. Though his lawyers ensured the promised financial support arrived promptly each month, he didn't know about the triplets, and Eliza saw no reason to inform him. The man who had discarded 1 child for social advancement didn't deserve to know he had 3. Home with the triplets reality set in. Days and nights blurred as Eliza and Marina established a grueling schedule of feedings, diaper changes, and medical appointments. The practical challenges of raising 3 infants simultaneously would have overwhelmed most new mothers, but Eliza approached it with the systematic precision she'd developed as a nurse. "I didn't think it was possible to function on so little sleep," she confessed to Dr. Hayes during a checkup. "And yet you're not just functioning, you're thriving," he observed. "Have you given any more thought to medical school?" Eliza laughed. "Between feedings and diaper changes, it's crossed my mind, but how could I possibly manage?" "Actually," Dr. Hayes said, "I've spoken with some colleagues at the university. There's a special pathway program for healthcare professionals entering medicine, more flexible scheduling, credit for prior experience." Hope flickered again. "Even for someone with 3 6-month-old babies?" "Especially for someone who's demonstrated your level of resilience," he replied. "The fall cohort starts in 4 months. I'd be happy to recommend you." With Marina's unwavering support and Dr. Hayes's recommendation, Eliza submitted her application. The day the acceptance letter arrived, the triplets were celebrating their first birthday with tiny cake smears across their identical blue eyes. Medical school with triplets redefined impossible. Eliza studied during naps, attended lectures with recordings monitoring the nursery, and memorized anatomy diagrams while supervising bath time. Marina became not just grandmother, but co-parent, adjusting her cleaning job schedule to maximize childcare coverage. Their community grew organically. Neighbors offered babysitting, classmates formed study groups in Eliza's living room to accommodate her schedule, and Dr. Hayes became a mentor, guiding her toward pediatric cardiology. "You have a gift for understanding both the science and the family experience," he told her during her second year. "That's something that can't be taught." By the time the triplets started preschool, Eliza was halfway through medical school, exhausted but excelling. The children thrived despite, or perhaps because of, the unconventional household. They grew up surrounded by medical textbooks, attending occasional lectures when childcare fell through, absorbing resilience through osmosis. "Mommy's going to be a doctor for kids' hearts," 4-year-old Nathan explained proudly to his preschool class. "She fixes people like Daddy broke her." The innocent comment, reported by his teacher, struck Eliza deeply. Despite her efforts to never speak negatively about Christopher, children perceived emotional truths adults tried to hide. That night, she sat the triplets down for a conversation about their father. "Your daddy lives in Boston," she explained simply. "He doesn't know about you because he and I stopped being married before you were born." "Doesn't he want us?" Serena asked, her expression serious beyond her years. "He doesn't know what he's missing," Eliza answered truthfully. "Someday, when you're older, you can decide if you want to meet him." The triplets accepted this explanation with the adaptability of childhood, but Eliza noticed them studying their features in mirrors afterward, perhaps searching for traces of the father they'd never known. Medical school graduation arrived simultaneously with the triplets' entrance to elementary school. Eliza, now Dr. Carter, began her residency at Pittsburgh Children's Hospital, specializing in pediatric cardiology. The punishing schedule of residency somehow seemed manageable after years of balancing medical school and parenting. Her research focus emerged naturally from her unique perspective, developing child-friendly cardiac monitoring devices that allowed young patients greater mobility and comfort. Her first-hand understanding of both medical necessity and quality of life for families made her innovations particularly effective. By the time the triplets turned 8, Dr. Eliza Carter had published several influential papers on pediatric cardiac care technology. Her patented monitoring system attracted attention from major medical device manufacturers, including startling interest from Winters Pharmaceuticals. "They're offering a development partnership," Dr. Hayes, now her colleague, explained. "Full research funding, clinical trial support, and distribution infrastructure." Eliza froze at the familiar name. "Winters? As in William Winters?" "The very same. Apparently, their R&D director saw your presentation at the Chicago conference last month and was impressed. They're hosting an innovation symposium in Boston next month and want you to headline." Boston, the city she'd fled 8 years ago, leaving behind both heartbreak and unfinished business. The city where Christopher Armstrong and his Winters connections had discarded her to protect their joint corporate interests. "I haven't been back to Boston since..." Eliza's voice trailed off. "Doctor." Hayes nodded, understanding. "I know, but this is a significant opportunity, Eliza. Your monitoring system could help thousands of children internationally with Winters' distribution network." That night, after tucking the triplets into bed, Eliza retrieved the USB drive she'd kept all these years containing the damaging Armstrong-Winters documents. She hadn't looked at them since leaving Boston, focused entirely on moving forward rather than dwelling on betrayal. The contents remained as troubling as she remembered, evidence of clinical data manipulation and FDA regulation circumvention that could potentially destroy both companies if revealed. Abigail found her staring at the computer screen, the 8-year-old's intuition as sharp as always. "Are you sad, Mommy?" Eliza closed the laptop, pulling her daughter close. "No, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about a trip we might take." "Where?" Abigail asked, blue Armstrong eyes wide with curiosity. "Boston," Eliza replied, "the city where you were born." Decision made, Eliza accepted the symposium invitation. 8 years after fleeing Boston as a devastated ex-wife, she would return as Dr. Carter, researcher, innovator, and mother. The triplets would accompany her, their existence still unknown to the father who had chosen corporate alliances over family. 2 weeks later, Eliza stood at the podium of the Boston Medical Innovation Conference, her groundbreaking pediatric cardiac monitoring system displayed on screens throughout the auditorium. In the third row, Christopher Armstrong sat frozen in shock, staring at the woman he barely recognized, not because she had changed physically, but because the confident, accomplished physician before him bore little resemblance to the shattered young nurse he had discarded. Neither was aware that backstage, Three 8-year-olds with unmistakable Armstrong blue eyes waited to meet their mother after her triumphant presentation, a family reunion about to collide with an unexpected reckoning. Christopher Armstrong hadn't planned to attend the Boston Medical Innovation Conference personally. These industry gatherings were typically handled by his R&D team, with Christopher making only brief appearances to shake hands with potential partners. But the agenda had caught his attention, specifically the keynote presentation on pediatric cardiac monitoring technology by Dr. E. Carter of Pittsburgh Children's Hospital. He'd assumed E. Carter was a man, probably older, one of those medical pioneers who divided their time between research and industry consultations. The name had triggered no recognition until Christopher saw her walk confidently onto the stage. Dr. Eliza Carter received her medical degree from the University of Pittsburgh, specializing in pediatric cardiology, the moderator announced. Her groundbreaking work combines cutting-edge monitoring technology with an exceptional understanding of real-world patient needs. Christopher gripped the armrests of his seat. Eliza, his ex-wife, stood before a packed auditorium of medical professionals, completely transformed from the woman he remembered. Gone was the somewhat tentative nurse, who had often seemed intimidated by Armstrong family gatherings. In her place stood a poised physician with an authoritative presence that commanded the room's attention. Traditional cardiac monitoring restricts children's movements and quality of life during critical developmental periods. Eliza began, her voice steady and professional. Our team at Pittsburgh Children's has developed a system that maintains comprehensive data collection while allowing patients nearly unrestricted mobility. As she continued her presentation, Christopher struggled to reconcile this accomplished doctor with the woman he had so easily discarded 8 years ago. The diamond ring he'd once placed on her finger was gone, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who had rebuilt herself entirely without him. When the audience erupted in applause at the conclusion of her presentation, Christopher remained seated, mind racing. What was she doing back in Boston? Was this deliberate, a calculated move to cross paths with him again? The symposium was co-sponsored by Winters Pharmaceuticals after all. He debated leaving before she saw him, but professional necessity kept him in place. Armstrong Technologies had invested heavily in medical device partnerships lately, and this monitoring system represented exactly the kind of innovation they needed. Running would look cowardly, and Armstrongs were never cowards. After the presentation, attendees flocked around Eliza in the exhibition hall. Christopher hung back, observing from a distance. She handled technical questions with effortless expertise, her smile professional but warm. Nothing about her suggested the wounded woman who had left Boston 8 years earlier. Finally, as the crowd thinned, he approached. Impressive presentation, Dr. Carter. Eliza turned, her expression revealing only the briefest flicker of emotion before settling into professional neutrality. Christopher, I wondered if you might be here. You've done remarkable work, he said, genuinely impressed despite himself. I had no idea you went to medical school. There's a lot you don't know about me, she replied evenly, checking her watch. If you'll excuse me, I have people waiting. Eliza, wait, Christopher said, lowering his voice. Can we talk? Perhaps dinner tonight? For closure. She studied him with clinical detachment. Closure? An interesting concept to suggest now, after 8 years of silence. Please, he persisted. One conversation. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but a decision being made. Fine. One conversation. The restaurant at my hotel, 7 o'clock. I have family obligations until then. Before he could respond, she was approached by a conference organizer, effectively ending their exchange. Christopher retreated, unsettled by the encounter. Family obligations. Had she remarried? The thought bothered him more than it should have. When Christopher returned to his office, he found his father waiting. At 71, Lawrence Armstrong remained an imposing figure in Boston business circles, though he had officially passed leadership of Armstrong Technologies to Christopher 5 years earlier. How was the medical conference? Lawrence asked, examining a tablet displaying company stock performance. Any promising partnerships? Dr. Carter's cardiac monitoring system shows potential, Christopher replied carefully. Carter? Lawrence looked up sharply. Not related to that nurse you were briefly married to? Christopher tensed. His father had never approved of his marriage to Eliza, considering it a youthful indiscretion best corrected by the strategic union with Freya Winters. It's Eliza. She's a physician now, specializing in pediatric cardiology. Lawrence's expression darkened. What's she doing back in Boston? Presenting her research. It's legitimate, Father. Her technology could be valuable to our medical division. Stay away from her, Lawrence warned. Your marriage to Freya may be over, but the Winters partnership remains crucial to our survival. William won't appreciate you reconnecting with your ex-wife. It's a professional interaction, Christopher countered, bristling at being instructed like a child. Lawrence's eyes narrowed. See that it remains that way. We've worked too hard rebuilding Armstrong Technologies to risk complications now. After his father left, Christopher leaned back in his chair, thoughts turbulent. His marriage to Freya had collapsed within 3 years, a mutual dissolution of a union that had never contained genuine affection. Their son Theodore was now 5, primarily raised by nannies as both parents pursued their separate ambitions. The Armstrong-Winters business alliance, however, had endured, becoming the foundation of both families' continued prosperity. At precisely 7 o'clock, Christopher entered the hotel restaurant. Eliza sat at a corner table studying a tablet while sipping sparkling water. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress, her chestnut hair now styled in a sophisticated shoulder-length cut. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, taking the seat across from her. Eliza set aside her tablet. "I have limited time, Christopher. Let's not waste it on pleasantries neither of us means." The directness caught him off guard. The Eliza he remembered had been more accommodating, more concerned with smoothing social interactions. This woman operated with decisive efficiency. "You've changed," he observed. "That tends to happen in 8 years." She signaled the waiter, especially when one is forced to completely rebuild their life. After ordering, Christopher attempted to bridge the chasm between them. "Your work is impressive. The monitoring system you've developed could help thousands of children." "That's the intention." Eliza's tone remained professional, as if speaking to any business acquaintance. "Pittsburgh Children's Hospital has been an excellent environment for development. We're now seeking manufacturing and distribution partnerships. Armstrong Technologies would be interested in discussing—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "I won't be partnering with your company or any Winters affiliate." "May I ask why?" "Professional considerations aside, our history is precisely why," Eliza stated flatly. "I know about the data manipulation in your previous cardiac trials with Winters Pharmaceuticals. I have no interest in associating my research with companies that prioritize profit over patient safety." Christopher's blood ran cold. "What exactly are you referring to?" Eliza met his gaze directly. "Documents I found the day I left Boston. Internal reports showing falsified clinical trial data for expedited FDA approval. Those are serious allegations," he said carefully, glancing around to ensure no one could overhear. "They're documented facts, Christopher." Her voice remained calm, but her eyes held steel. "I've kept copies all these years. Insurance, you might say." Before Christopher could respond, his attention was caught by movement near the restaurant entrance. 3 children, around 8 years old, he guessed, stood with an older woman who bore a striking resemblance to Eliza's mother. The children scanned the restaurant until the tallest, a girl with intelligent eyes, spotted their table and waved. Eliza returned the wave with a warm smile that transformed her face. "Excuse me a moment," she said, rising from the table. Christopher watched, confused, as Eliza greeted the children with affection, speaking briefly with the older woman before returning, with all 3 children in tow. "Christopher," she said with deliberate formality, "I'd like you to meet Abigail, Nathan, and Serena. My children." The world seemed to stop. 3 pairs of eyes, a familiar, striking blue that Christopher recognized from his own mirror, studied him with open curiosity. The boy had Christopher's jawline. The taller girl, his mother's distinctive aristocratic nose. The smaller girl tilted her head exactly as his sister always had. "Your children," he repeated numbly, mathematical calculations racing through his mind. 8 years since Eliza left. She had been pregnant then, pregnant with his child. No, his children, triplets. "Guys, this is Mr. Armstrong," Eliza explained to the children. "An old acquaintance from when I lived in Boston." "Do you make the heart monitors like Mom?" asked the boy, Nathan, studying Christopher with unnerving intensity. "No," Christopher managed. "I run a technology company." "Is that why you're having dinner with Mom?" For her invention? Asked Abigail, the more serious-looking of the girls. Eliza interjected smoothly. Mr. Armstrong and I have some business to discuss. You three should go with Grandma Marina for dinner as planned. I'll see you upstairs afterward. After quick hugs, the children departed with their grandmother, though not without curious backward glances. Christopher sat frozen, processing the revelation that had literally walked up to his table. Triplets, he finally said. You were carrying triplets when you left Boston. Yes, Eliza resumed her seat calmly. I discovered that after returning to Pittsburgh. And you never told me. The accusation slipped out before he could temper it. Eliza's expression hardened. You made it abundantly clear that one child was already an inconvenient complication to your plans with Freya. Why would I burden you with three? They're my children too, Christopher insisted, a strange protective instinct surging inside him. Biologically, yes, Eliza acknowledged coolly. In every way that matters, emotionally, financially, or as a parental presence, no. They've never known you, Christopher, because you chose not to know them. The brutal truth silenced him momentarily. I didn't know they existed. Would it have mattered if you had? She challenged. You were marrying Freya, securing the winter's investment. Your priorities were clear. In the uncomfortable silence that followed, their meals arrived. Christopher had no appetite, his mind filled with images of the three children. His children. Strangers who carried his blood, his features, his family legacy. They're remarkable, he said quietly. Healthy? Happy? Something in Eliza's expression softened slightly. Very. Abigail is our scientist, constantly experimenting, analyzing. Nathan is creative, music, art, building things. Serena is our diplomat, interpersonal intelligence beyond her years. Like their mother, Christopher observed. And certain traits from their father, Eliza conceded. Determination, analytical thinking, your mother's musical ability in Nathan's case. The casual mention of inherited traits from a family the children had never known struck Christopher profoundly. His mother had died 2 years earlier, never knowing she had 3 additional grandchildren. I have a son with Freya, he said abruptly. Theodore, he's 5. I know, Eliza replied. The society pages documented your perfect family quite thoroughly, at least until your divorce 3 years ago. The precision of her knowledge surprised him. You followed news about me? I monitored potential threats to my children, she corrected. Your family's influence in Boston remains considerable. They were never under threat from me, Christopher protested. Your father once told me I wasn't suitable to carry the Armstrong name, Eliza reminded him. What would he say about 3 children who don't fit his pedigree requirements? The observation struck uncomfortably close to conversations Christopher had endured during Lawrence's rare visits with Theodore. His father's thinly veiled comments about the boy's proper upbringing compared to unfortunate genetic complications in other branches of prominent families. How long are you in Boston? He asked, changing the subject. We leave tomorrow evening. This was a brief trip, the conference, some meetings with potential partners, and showing the children a bit of the city where they were conceived. I want to know them, Christopher said suddenly, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Eliza set down her fork. After 8 years of complete absence, you don't get to make demands. It's not a demand. It's a request. He leaned forward. They're Armstrongs, Eliza. They're Carters, she corrected sharply. They've never known any other name. Christopher absorbed this information with an unexpected pang. Of course they wouldn't have his name. Why had he assumed otherwise? I've missed 8 years of their lives. I don't want to miss any more. That's not your decision to make, Eliza stated firmly. I won't disrupt their lives to satisfy your sudden paternal interest. Perhaps not sudden, he countered. Seeing them, it's awakened something I didn't know was there. Eliza's skeptical expression made clear her thoughts on his revelation. Convenient timing, considering your marriage to Freya failed, and your heir with suitable pedigree is now shared custody. Christopher flinched at having his own cruel words from 8 years ago thrown back at him. I was wrong, Eliza, about so many things. Yes, you were, she agreed calmly. But acknowledgement doesn't erase consequences. My children have grown up without a father because of your choices. They're secure, loved, and thriving. I won't risk their emotional well-being for your midlife crisis of conscience. Before he could respond, Eliza's phone chimed. She checked it and stood. Marina needs me upstairs. This conversation is over, Christopher. Please, he said, rising as well. Just tell me what I can do to be part of their lives. Anything. Eliza regarded him with an unreadable expression. Prove that you're not the man who discarded their mother and would have discarded them. Not with words. Those mean nothing coming from you, but with actions. How? He asked, desperate to find a path forward. Figure it out, she said simply. You're supposedly a brilliant strategist. Use that intelligence for something beyond corporate manipulation for once. After she left, Christopher remained at the table, mind reeling. 3 children, his children, growing up without him, not even knowing him. The weight of what he had lost, what he had thrown away, settled on him like a physical burden. That night, unable to sleep, Christopher reviewed every document he could access about Armstrong Winters' joint ventures. Eliza's accusation about data manipulation wasn't new. He'd suspected ethical corners had been cut during the desperate period when the companies first aligned, but he had deliberately looked away, telling himself that corporate survival justified certain compromises. With morning came clarity. Christopher arrived at Armstrong Technologies' headquarters before dawn, accessing files even his father didn't know he could reach. By noon, he had compiled irrefutable evidence of systematic ethical violations across multiple projects, violations that could destroy both Armstrong Technologies and Winters Pharmaceuticals if exposed. Lawrence Armstrong found his son still working when he arrived for their scheduled board meeting. "You missed the breakfast with William Winters," Lawrence said accusingly. He wanted updates on the regulatory approval timeline. "I've been reviewing our compliance documentation," Christopher replied, not looking up from his computer. "Or rather, our systematic non-compliance." Lawrence's expression shifted to alarm. "What are you talking about?" "Data manipulation, protocol violations, falsified trial results." Christopher finally looked up. "The foundation of our partnership with Winters is fundamentally corrupt, Father." "That's absurd," Lawrence blustered. "We operate within industry standards." "No, we don't," Christopher interrupted firmly. "And I've allowed it to continue far too long." Lawrence studied his son with growing concern. "This is about her, isn't it? Your ex-wife. What did she say to you?" "Eliza opened my eyes, yes," Christopher acknowledged. "But not in the way you think. She's threatening us? Blackmail?" Lawrence's mind immediately jumped to damage control. "We'll handle it. The family legal team can—" "She has triplets, Father," Christopher said quietly. "My children, 8 years old, 2 girls and a boy." Lawrence froze. "That's impossible. She never said anything about multiple—" "She discovered it after leaving Boston, after I discarded her for the Winters alliance you orchestrated." Christopher's voice held no accusation, just stated fact. 3 Armstrong heirs growing up in Pittsburgh without our name, without our support, without knowing their father or their legacy. "This changes nothing," Lawrence insisted, recovering quickly. "Children can be managed, financial arrangements made. The Winters partnership must remain our priority." Christopher stared at his father, seeing clearly for the first time the moral bankruptcy that had shaped generations of Armstrong business practices. "No, Father, not anymore." "What are you suggesting?" Lawrence demanded. Christopher turned his computer screen, displaying the document he'd been drafting all morning. "A complete restructuring of Armstrong Technologies, voluntary disclosure of compliance violations to regulatory authorities, separation from the Winters partnerships that depend on continuing those violations." "You'll destroy everything," Lawrence shouted. "Generations of Armstrong work, gone." "No," Christopher countered calmly. "I'll save what's worth saving and discard what's corrupt, just as I should have done 8 years ago when given the choice between integrity and expedience." Lawrence collapsed into a chair, face ashen. "The board will never approve this. I'll never approve this." "The board doesn't need to approve a voluntary disclosure from the CEO," Christopher explained. "And as for your approval," he paused, meeting his father's gaze directly. "I'm no longer seeking it." As Lawrence stormed out, Christopher returned to his draft. The path forward was clear, if painful. Dismantling corrupt practices, accepting consequences, rebuilding on ethical foundations. Not just for Armstrong Technologies, but for himself. 3 days after Eliza and the triplets returned to Pittsburgh, a courier delivered a thick envelope to their home. Inside was not a legal threat, as Eliza feared, but something entirely unexpected. Comprehensive documentation of Christopher Armstrong's voluntary disclosure to federal authorities of Armstrong Technologies' ethical violations, and his personal statement accepting responsibility for practices conducted under his leadership. Attached was a handwritten note. "You asked for proof that I'm not the same man who discarded you and our children. This is my first step, not with words, but with actions. Whether or not I earn a place in their lives, they deserve a father they could someday be proud of, rather than one they would inevitably grow to despise." C. Eliza sat motionless, the document spread before her. The Christopher Armstrong she had known would never have sacrificed professional advantage for moral principle. The man who wrote this note was someone else entirely, or perhaps someone who had always existed beneath the Armstrong legacy's crushing weight. Meanwhile in Boston, Christopher faced the board of directors he had stunned with his unilateral actions. Regulatory investigations had already begun. Stock prices were plummeting. His father refused to speak to him. And yet, for the first time in his adult life, Christopher Armstrong felt truly free. Of pretense, of compromise, of the generational corruption he had inherited and perpetuated. He had likely lost his company, his family standing, possibly even his freedom if criminal charges resulted. But he had found something unexpected in the process, the first fragile possibility of redemption. 6 months after Christopher Armstrong's shocking disclosure to federal authorities, the once untouchable Armstrong technologies stood dramatically transformed. Federal investigations had exposed decades of ethical violations, resulting in record-breaking fines, mandatory oversight, and a complete restructuring of senior leadership. The family dynasty that had ruled Boston's business community for generations was publicly dismantled piece by piece. Christopher himself had stepped down as CEO, accepting personal responsibility in a move that stunned corporate America. Legal experts predicted he would face criminal charges, though his voluntary disclosures and cooperation might mitigate potential sentencing. The financial press labeled it corporate suicide, the deliberate destruction of his own empire. On a crisp autumn morning in Pittsburgh, Eliza reviewed these developments in the quiet of her study before her children awakened. The business sections of major newspapers had tracked Christopher's fall with the same enthusiasm they had once chronicled his rise. What none of these articles captured was the man behind the headlines. The unexpected transformation that had begun the night he discovered his triplets. Eliza's phone chimed with a text message. "I'll be in Pittsburgh tomorrow. May I see you? Christopher." She hesitated before replying, "My office at the hospital, 2 p.m. Their communication over the past months had been minimal and strictly related to legal matters as the investigations proceeded. Christopher had made no demands regarding the children, respecting her boundaries with a patience entirely foreign to the man she had once known. The following afternoon, Eliza barely recognized the figure who entered her office. Gone was the impeccably dressed executive in custom Italian suits. Christopher Armstrong now wore simple khakis and a button-down shirt, his hair slightly longer, his posture less commanding. Most striking was the absence of the Armstrong family signet ring he had never removed in all the time she had known him. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, remaining standing until she gestured toward a chair. "I've been following the news," Eliza said, adopting her professional tone. "The investigations seem extensive." Christopher nodded. "More than even I anticipated. 3 generations of corruption don't unravel easily." "And your father?" A shadow crossed Christopher's face. "Lawrence suffered a minor stroke when the first indictments were announced. He's recovering, but he's disowned me in every way that matters." "I'm sorry about his health," Eliza said sincerely. "The doctors say he'll recover fully." Christopher paused. "My relationship with him won't." Eliza studied the man before her, searching for signs of the calculating manipulator she had once married. Instead, she found unexpected vulnerability in his expression, a rawness that the old Christopher would have considered weakness. "Why did you really do it?" she asked directly. "Destroy everything your family built?" "Because it wasn't worth saving," Christopher answered without hesitation. "Meeting our children, seeing you again, it forced me to confront what I'd become, what the Armstrong legacy truly represented. Our children," Eliza corrected gently, "have never known you as their father." "I know," pain flashed across his features. "That's why I'm here, not to demand a place in their lives, but to ask what I can do to earn one." The humility in his request, so contrary to the entitlement that had defined him, caught Eliza off guard. "They're curious about you," she admitted, "especially since the news stories started mentioning your name." Hope flickered in Christopher's eyes. "Have you told them that you're their biological father?" "Yes, last month." Eliza remembered the careful conversation with her 3 inquisitive 8-year-olds. They had questions I could no longer deflect. How did they react? Like children, with honest curiosity untainted by adult complications. "Nathan wanted to know if you like building things too." "Abigail asked if your eyes are really the same blue as hers." "Serena wanted to know why you weren't in our family photos." Christopher absorbed this with visible emotion. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, simplified for their age, that you and I were married once, but separated before they were born, that you didn't know about them until recently." "Did you tell them I abandoned you?" The question emerged quietly. Eliza shook her head. "They don't need adult bitterness in their understanding of themselves. I said we wanted different things from life, which isn't untrue." "You're a better person than I deserved," Christopher said softly. "This isn't about deserving," Eliza replied firmly. "It's about what's best for 3 children who didn't ask to be born into our complicated history." Christopher nodded, understanding the implicit boundary. "Would you consider allowing me to meet them properly? As their father?" The question hung between them, weighted with 8 years of absence, with betrayal and redemption, with the uncertain future they now navigated. "I would," Eliza said finally, "but with conditions. Consistent presence or none at all. No promises you can't keep. No disappearing when it becomes difficult." "I understand," Christopher said solemnly. "I've rented an apartment here in Pittsburgh. I've stepped away from what remains of Armstrong Technologies. I'm prepared to be here, truly here, for as long as they'll have me." The man who had once dismissed Pittsburgh as beneath his consideration had relocated there indefinitely, perhaps the most convincing evidence of his transformation. 2 weeks later, in a quiet corner of a local park, Christopher was formally introduced to his children as their father. The meeting was brief, carefully structured by Eliza, and supported by a child psychologist friend who specialized in family reunifications. "You have Grandmother Armstrong's piano hands," Christopher told Nathan, noticing the boy's long fingers. "Mom says I play like her," Nathan replied cautiously. "She would have loved teaching you," Christopher said softly, the weight of what his mother had missed settling heavily upon him. With Abigail, he discovered a shared fascination with architectural design. With Serena, an unexpected connection through their mutual love of dogs. Small bridges built across the chasm of absence, tentative but real. The months that followed established a new rhythm. Christopher attended school events, helped with science projects, and gradually earned a place in the periphery of the life Eliza had built without him. They developed a cautious co-parenting relationship, not intimate but respectful, centered entirely on the children's well-being. As federal investigations concluded, Christopher accepted a plea deal that included community service, significant personal financial penalties, but no prison time. His cooperation had indeed earned leniency. The Armstrong family fortune was decimated, though Christopher had secured trusts for Theodore and the triplets before the asset freezes began. "Will you ever go back to Boston?" Eliza asked one evening after Christopher had returned the children from their weekly dinner together. "Only as needed for Theodore," he answered. His relationship with his younger son remained complicated, filtered through Freya's bitterness and the boy's confusion. "There's nothing else for me there now." What about Armstrong Technologies? Decades of business prominence didn't simply vanish, even after scandal. "The board has removed the Armstrong name entirely. It's been rebranded, restructured, better that way." He smiled wryly. "Besides, I'm finding purpose in unexpected places." Christopher had begun volunteering with an organization helping former convicts develop business skills, using his expertise to serve those society had discarded, much as he had once discarded Eliza. "The children mentioned you're seeing someone," he said carefully, changing the subject. "A Dr. Hayes?" Eliza nodded, surprised by his awareness. "Cameron was my mentor during medical school. He's been part of our lives for years." "He seems like a good man," Christopher observed without jealousy. "Abigail says he helps with her science experiments." "He does," Eliza confirmed. "The triplets adore him." Something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement that life had continued. Healing had occurred. New connections had formed in the void Christopher's absence had created. "I'm glad you found happiness, Eliza," he said sincerely. "You deserved so much better than what I gave you." 1 year after their reunion in Boston, Eliza received an unexpected delivery, a small wooden box containing 3 handcrafted lockets. Inside each was a family tree, meticulously researched and illustrated, tracing both the Carter and Armstrong lineages. The accompanying note read, "For our children to understand where they come from, both the parts to emulate and the parts to transcend, with gratitude for the second chance I never deserved, Christopher." That evening, as she helped the triplets with homework, Eliza reflected on the unpredictable journey that had brought them here. Her successful medical career represented professional triumph born from personal devastation. Her children were thriving despite, or perhaps partly because of, the challenges that had shaped their family's formation. Christopher's presence in their lives remained a work in progress. Neither the fairy tale reconciliation of romantic fiction nor the bitter estrangement that might have seemed inevitable after their past. Instead, they had found something more nuanced, a careful reconstruction of broken trust, a limited but meaningful connection centered entirely on 3 children who deserved to know both halves of their heritage. The victory was bittersweet. Eliza had achieved everything she had once dreamed of professionally, proving her worth far beyond the limitations Christopher and his family had once placed upon her. The children were healthy, balanced, understanding at their young age that families came in many configurations. Yet these achievements had come at tremendous cost. Years of struggle, of single parenting, of rebuilding from emotional devastation. For Christopher, the price had been steeper still. His family legacy, his fortune, his reputation, his father's approval, all sacrificed in belated recognition of what truly mattered. He would never fully recover what he had lost, never completely heal the wounds his choices had inflicted. The Armstrong empire he had once valued above all else lay in ruins, while the family he had discarded flourished without him at its center. As Nathan practiced piano that evening, his grandmother Armstrong's talent flowing through his fingers, Eliza realized something unexpected had emerged from the wreckage of their past. Not forgiveness exactly, but something adjacent to it. A recognition that people could change, that redemption was possible, that healing could occur without erasure of the scars that remained. The life she had now wasn't what she had envisioned when she first fell in love with Christopher Armstrong. It was something entirely different, harder won, more resilient, shaped by both betrayal and perseverance. A testament not to romantic reconciliation, but to the more complex healing that occurs when we refuse to be defined by those who once discarded us. In the end, that was perhaps the most surprising revelation of all, that sometimes the deepest wounds lead not back to where we began, but forward to places we never imagined we could reach. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now and we'll see you there.